Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into a world of mud-caked roads, rusting chainmail, and very questionable hygiene. You're not a knight in shining armor, galloping gallantly across a dewy field at sunrise. No, you're something much closer to reality, a medieval soldier, probably conscripted against your will, wearing gear that smells like goat, and marching toward your doom with a stale crust of bread in your bag and a toothache you've been ignoring for 2 years. You stand in a narrow village square, staring at the man who just told you, quite flatly, that you've been drafted. You blink. Surely there's been a mistake. You're a cooper, or a tanner, or maybe a shepherd on good days. The last time you held a weapon was when you waved a stick at a goose. But no, your lord needs bodies. Not skilled ones. Not volunteers. Just warm bodies. Conscription in the Middle Ages is less, serve your country, and more, serve or else. Your name was on a list, maybe because you own a functioning leg and no immediate family to bribe the clerk. Historians still argue whether local lords offered any kind of true incentive for service beyond, "Come die for me and maybe I won't tax your widow." Either way, here you are. The recruiter hands you a dull dagger, gives you a grin missing 3 teeth, and gestures toward a group of men already half-drunk on something that might be wine or might be vinegar. They'll be your new unit, though that word implies coordination. In truth, it's just a mob of equally terrified peasants, most of whom have never walked farther than the nearest field. You don't get a formal send-off. No band. No waving flags. Just your mother crying behind a half-closed door, and a chicken pecking your shin because you're standing in its favorite dust patch. And still, somehow, the worst part hasn't started. Marching orders come swiftly. The local bailiff shouts that you'll be leaving at dawn, which is an optimistic term. Sunrise looks a lot like fog and regret. No one tells you where you're going, or for how long, or what the fighting is even about. One of the veterans mutters something about a border dispute. Another claims it's over sheep. Another says it's a holy war, though the only holy thing in your life is the hole in your only pair of socks. And just like that, you're a soldier. You try to psych yourself up. You think maybe this'll be like the songs. There'll be glory. Honor. Banners waving. Maidens weeping. 10 steps into the journey and your boots are already full of mud and disappointment. Your gear is laughable. What little you've been given was looted from the last batch of poor souls who didn't make it back. Your tunic has a bloodstain no one bothered to wash out. The leather straps on your belt are so brittle they snap if you sneeze too hard. And your only protection is a wooden shield with a hole in it, perfect for ventilation, terrible for arrows. Someone tries to give you a pep talk that amounts to, "Stay behind the big guys." Helpful. Inspiring. Accurate, probably. And then the fear creeps in. Not the fear of battle, that'll come later. This is a quieter dread. A realization that your life isn't really your own anymore. That your village, for all its smells and squabbles, is now behind you. That you might never see that patch of farmland again. Or your dog. Or that girl who sells turnips and sometimes smiled at you when her dad wasn't looking. You walk through familiar roads that quickly become unfamiliar. Your group passes through dense forests that feel like they're watching you. You sleep in barns when you're lucky, under the stars when you're not. One night it rains so hard that you wake up soaked and shivering, your blanket now indistinguishable from a wet rag. Someone in the group catches a fever. It starts with a cough and ends with a burial, unmarked, just past a clump of nettles. No one speaks of it. You press on. At one village, children throw pebbles at you. In another, an old woman spits and calls you cursed. Soldiers are seen as little better than brigands. You get strange looks at inns, where the innkeepers try to water down your ale and keep their daughters out of sight. You try to make friends. There's Thomas, a farmhand with thick arms and a good singing voice. He hums old songs at night, and it's the only time anyone really relaxes. There's Martin, who claims he once saw a dragon, though he also thinks rain is the sky crying, so you're skeptical. Some of the older soldiers tell stories around the fire. One insists the last war he fought involved an army of naked berserkers who smeared themselves in butter before battle. Fringe legend, sure, but apparently that was a thing in parts of Northern Europe. You try not to imagine it. The days blur. Each one is colder, harder. Your feet blister. Your back aches from carrying a pack that seems to grow heavier every hour. One morning you wake up with a tick embedded behind your knee. No one helps remove it. You just yank and bleed. Historians still argue whether early medieval levies like yours were expected to last whole campaigns or just pitch in for a season. Either way, you get the sense that your ticket home has no return date. You were conscripted with a shrug, and you'll probably be forgotten with one too. Still, you keep walking. Not out of courage, but because there's no other choice. You're in it now. You wake up with a rock pressing into your hip, the dew already soaking through your threadbare cloak. Someone kicks your foot, gently, but enough to remind you this isn't a dream. Time to move again. Except today, you're not just marching. Today, you're getting your armor. Which sounds exciting, until you see the pile. A cart creaks into view, loaded with what might generously be called equipment. Most of it is dented. Some pieces still have dried blood on them. You're pretty sure one helmet has a rat living in it. This, apparently, is your gear. There's no ceremony, just a grumpy quartermaster muttering about shortages and tossing items like he's feeding chickens. Your armor consists of a leather jerkin that smells like fish and fits like a potato sack, a mismatched set of shoulder plates tied on with fraying string, and a metal helmet shaped like a bucket with a slit. Not a knight's sallet or a nobleman's bassinet. This thing was probably hammered together in a barn by someone who failed blacksmithing school. Historians still argue whether peasant soldiers were regularly equipped by lords or expected to bring their own gear. Based on your experience, the answer seems to be, yes, but only if you were lucky, rich, or both. Your sword is technically a sword, in the same way a spoon is technically a digging tool. It's short, slightly bent, and clearly used. The handle is sticky. You don't ask why. The blade wobbles in your hand. Thomas gets a spear with a cracked shaft, and Martin is given an axe that looks like it's already buried itself in too many skulls. Its edge is jagged, like someone's been using it to open tins, except those haven't been invented yet. One poor guy gets a sharpened stick. Just a stick. He looks at it like he's being pranked. As for shields, don't expect any heraldry or noble crests. Yours is a warped circle of wood barely held together by rusted iron bands. You test it against a small stone. It cracks. Inspiring. You're told to tie your armor on tight. You try. The straps snap. You tie knots. They slip. Your helmet won't sit straight unless you tilt your head. You imagine walking into battle like this, lopsided, blind in one eye, tripping over your own belt. There's no instruction on how to wear any of this. No one checks if it fits. One man has to cut slits into his leather tunic just to breathe. Another puts his helmet on backward and no one corrects him for a full hour. Later, Someone hands you a set of arrows. You ask where the bow is. He laughs and walks away. Fringe historians have noted that battlefield salvage was a common practice. Dead men's gear was stripped and redistributed. You realize now this wasn't done out of efficiency. It was out of desperation. You practice walking in your new outfit. It jingles. It chafes. Every step is a creak and a squeak, like you're a badly oiled puppet. The helmet limits your vision to a blurry slit of world, and every breath echoes back at you in a metallic rattle. You already have a headache. And the sun isn't even up. Then comes weapons training, or rather, the complete lack of it. One older soldier, clearly drunk and missing 2 fingers, waves his sword around and yells, "Aim for the soft parts," before falling backward into a bush. That's the full seminar. You ask how to block. Thomas asks about formations. Martin wonders what to do if you drop your weapon. The answer to all 3 seems to be, don't. You take a swing at a post. The blade bounces off. Your wrist jolts like it's been slapped by a ghost. The next swing hits, but your aim is so off that you knock a loose board out of the fence. Everyone laughs. You consider running. The smell of unwashed leather fills your nose. You now understand why people died before age 40. It's not the swords, it's the mold. You hear a rumor that the commander of your unit has a real sword made in Italy, with silver inlays. He wears plate armor polished to a shine and rides a horse the size of a bear. The gap between you and him might as well be a canyon. You're a disposable asset. He's the headline act. Still, you try to adjust. You cut the straps shorter. You stuff cloth under your helmet so it doesn't rattle. You tie your sword to your wrist so you don't drop it in panic. These are not solutions. These are desperate inventions by desperate men. Historians still debate whether common infantry had standardized equipment during major medieval campaigns. Based on your current ensemble, you'd guess standardized means bad in the same way for everyone. At night, you try to sleep in your armor to get used to the weight. It doesn't work. You wake up drenched in sweat, back twisted, arms numb. Martin says he dreamed of drowning in metal. You think that might have actually happened. A week later, you're told to line up for inspection. The Lord himself rides down the line, glancing at your gear with mild disgust. He stops at one man whose shield is so rotten it breaks when tapped. The man is told to fix it. With what, exactly? Hope. The Lord doesn't speak to you. Just rides past. His horse looks better fed than you. It probably is. You think of the songs again. The tales of brave men in gleaming armor. Glorious charges. Noble deaths. You now suspect those were written by people who never wore a 10-pound helmet on a hot day. One night, Thomas jokes that you all look like a traveling troupe of failed jugglers. No one laughs. Everyone knows he's right. You dream of your old life. Of soft grass and warm bread. Of breezes without the stink of 30 men in leather. You wonder how long this war will last. No one knows. Wars last until they don't. And tomorrow, you march again. Your feet hurt before dawn even thinks about showing up. You dream about walking, and then you wake to find you're still doing it. The march begins in silence, save for the occasional cough, fart, or groan as men drag themselves into loose formation. If it can even be called that. You're not marching in columns or any grand parade-style order. You're stumbling in clumps, half asleep, armor scraping, pack sagging. The path is nothing more than two muddy grooves through the wilderness, lined with slumped trees and the occasional dead crow. The rain starts within the hour. Of course it does. There's no proper footwear. Your boots are stitched leather sacks, barely shaped like feet. They leak. They rub. You feel a blister growing like it's sprouting a personality. One guy wraps his feet in straw. Another walks barefoot, claiming it connects him to the earth. He'll regret that when he steps on a nail, or whatever sharp thing happens to be festering in the mud. There's no map. No one you trust, anyway, has a clear idea of where you're going. The older soldiers just nod vaguely and say things like, "Couple more leagues." A league is about 3 miles, but somehow it always means, just far enough to break your spirit. You don't get breaks. Or if you do, they're arbitrary. When the officers stop to argue, you sit down. When they finish arguing, you're expected to be up and moving before you've even adjusted your belt. Martin tries to nap under a bush during one stop. He wakes up with ants in his beard. And the smell. Oh, the smell. A thick stew of sweat, unwashed bodies, moldy leather, wet dog, and something disturbingly like sour milk. Every man around you stinks in his own special way. No one's bathed in days. Or weeks. A passing breeze carries the scent of rotting vegetation. You gag. You also realize you've gone noseblind to your own stench. Comforting. One soldier, a wiry man named Joffrey, claims that walking through nettles helps toughen the skin. He walks off path into a patch of the stuff and comes back red, itchy, and deeply regretting his life choices. For the record, he says, "Don't do that." Too late. Martin had already followed him. Historians still argue whether medieval armies moved efficiently or mostly wandered aimlessly, relying on local guides and luck. Based on your current march, the answer is definitely luck, and it's running thin. You cross a river by wading through waist-deep water. The current isn't strong, but it's cold enough to make your teeth hurt. A man slips and loses his spear. Another drops his sack and watches it float downstream. Inside was his only dry shirt. He doesn't speak for the rest of the day. Once across, you walk in soggy silence, wet from the waist down and praying your skin doesn't start to rot. Spoiler, it might. By evening, you reach a clearing that someone optimistically calls a campsite. It's a patch of trampled grass, slightly less muddy than the rest of the world. You collapse into it, remove your boots with effort, and a horrifying squelch, and examine your feet. They're gray. Wrinkled. Possibly cursed. There's no firewood. Not because no one looked, but because everything is wet. You gnaw on some jerky that tastes like it was made from a saddle. One man swears it's horse meat. Another hopes it is. At least that way it's not rat. Your stomach growls in protest. You ate hours ago, a crust of black bread and something pickled that might have been a cucumber in another lifetime. It sits in your gut like a brick. You miss garlic. And onions. And anything that doesn't make you question your life choices. Sleep is an ordeal. You lie in damp clothes on a damp patch of earth, shivering and trying not to think about the weird itch spreading across your shin. Lice? Probably. You scratch and try to hum something familiar, but your throat's sore and your mood worse. The stars are bright tonight. Cold and distant. You'd think that would bring comfort, but they only remind you how small you are. Just a speck in an army that itself is barely a speck on a map drawn by someone who's probably never walked through 3 days of swamp to fight over a castle that no one actually wants. Someone nearby coughs hard, then doesn't stop. Another joins in. It spreads like a chorus. A few men joke that they've started their own plague band. You laugh. Then you cough. You stop laughing. Your commander rides through the camp, flanked by actual knights in shiny mail. Their tents are already set, complete with banners, stools, and even a cooking pot. You stare. Thomas mumbles, "Must be nice." And it is. They have blankets, wine, dry socks. You have a rock in your spine and a squirrel eyeballing your bread. Fringe accounts suggest that some medieval armies used musical instruments to keep morale up during long marches. You don't see any here. No flutes. No drums. Just the rhythmic misery of feet dragging through mud and the occasional man muttering to himself about going home. The next morning, your legs feel like they've been chewed on by wolves. You try to stretch. Everything aches. You barely slept. A boot's gone missing, Martin's. He finds it 20 feet away, gnawed by something. He puts it on anyway. No one says a word. You try to dry your shirt over a weak fire, but someone spills water on it. The smoke stings your eyes. Your boots are still wet. They'll stay wet. Forever. And so, you march again. No idea where. No end in sight. Just a line of men with sore backs and quieter voices, trudging through a world that doesn't care. Your armor creaks. Your stomach growls. Your feet blister. Welcome to the medieval campaign trail. The camp smells worse than the battlefield. You'd think the opposite would be true, right? After all, there aren't any fresh corpses here, just the slow decay of basic human dignity. You arrive near dusk, sore and sunburned, welcomed by a sea of tents that look more like laundry accidents than military infrastructure. No one assigns you a tent. You just pick a patch of ground that's slightly less wet than the others and hope no one else already claimed it by scent marking. You try to pitch what might charitably be called a shelter. It's a canvas sheet with holes in it, some sticks, and rope that snaps if you look at it funny. 5 minutes in, a gust of wind flips the whole thing into a nearby puddle. You curse under your breath and flop down on the wet ground anyway. At least it doesn't move. Latrines? Oh, you sweet summer child. There are no latrines. There's just, over there, the vague direction where everyone shuffles off with a grim look and a handful of leaves. The stench is immediate. It drifts across camp like a toxic fog. You try not to breathe through your nose. It doesn't help. A narrow trench serves as the communal waste area. Except nobody really uses it properly. Some relieve themselves just outside their tents, too tired or sick to care. One unlucky soul trips and falls in during the night. He's pulled out, hosed down with a wineskin, and re-nicknamed Sir Pooh. No one remembers his real name anymore. You've barely settled when the lice begin their nightly parade. You scratch. Then scratch more. Then realize your hair is crawling. Thomas jokes that his scalp is a battlefield, and he's losing. You laugh, then find a tick behind your ear. That's new. Historians still argue whether hygiene practices in medieval military camps were systematized or entirely left to the whims of the commanders. Judging by your current living conditions, whims feels generous. It's more like, hope the men figure it out before the camp becomes a disease buffet. Food arrives, if you can call it that. A bowl of thin porridge ladled out from a pot that may never have been cleaned. You find a small pebble in it. Or maybe a tooth. You don't ask. You eat. Water is riskier. There's a stream nearby, but it runs close to the waste trench. You boil it if you have time and fire. Most don't. You drink anyway. Your stomach makes ominous noises by morning. Sleep isn't restful. You wake up stiff and colder than expected. The earth beneath you is unforgiving, riddled with roots and tiny rocks that lodge themselves in your spine like nature's acupuncture. Someone snores. Someone else weeps softly. You pull your cloak tighter and pretend you're not here. Then the noise starts, grunting, groaning, hacking. A man nearby vomits something black. Another has sores along his arms. It spreads. You don't know what it is, but it's everywhere. The camp becomes quieter, and not in a peaceful way. More like the silence before a sneeze, thick with tension and the sense that something bad is coming. One morning, you hear that 3 men died in the night. No one knows how. Or maybe no one wants to know. They're dragged out and buried in shallow graves beyond the tree line. You don't get to say goodbye. You didn't even know their names. Martin tries to boil some herbs to fight the cough. He calls it forest tea. It tastes like regret. You drink it anyway. Can't be worse than the porridge. Someone swears a rat crawled across his chest during the night. You start sleeping with one hand on your sword. Not because you're expecting an attack, but because it makes you feel like you might survive long enough to use it. The officers stay in separate tents, of course, larger ones, with dry blankets and guards posted outside. You don't see them much. When you do, they smell like soap and smugness. You start to notice that the men around you are changing. Not just physically, though the weight loss, sunken eyes, and peeling skin are hard to miss. No, it's mental. The jokes come slower. Laughter dies quicker. Hope has the shelf life of milk in this place. One afternoon, a man wanders out into the woods and doesn't return. Maybe he deserted. Maybe he just wanted silence. Maybe he got eaten. No one goes looking. Fringe reports suggest some camps turn to superstition during hard times, charms against plague, rituals to ward off bad luck, little effigies carved from bone or wood. Thomas ties a crow feather to his belt and mutters something about keeping the rotman away. You don't question it. You begin marking time not by days, but by which body part hurts the most. Blisters mean it's Wednesday. Rashes mean it's Sunday. Rain returns. It's cold. It seeps into your bones. Your clothes never dry. Your socks smell like betrayal. You dream of home. Warm bread. Your mother humming. The village pig you once tried to ride. Anything but this. But morning always comes. And the march resumes. And the stink follows you. You learn not to look too closely at the stew. You eat it anyway. You have to. One day you find a beetle in your bowl. You name it Jeffrey and put it on a stick. He becomes your tiny, crunchy mascot. Then you eat him too. Because you're hungry. Always hungry. Camp life isn't rest. It's rot in slow motion. It's payday, or so the rumor says. You and the rest of the mud-caked mob shuffle toward a grumpy man behind a rickety table. He's got a ledger, a purse, and a sneer that suggests none of this is going to go well. You were promised silver. Maybe a handful of coins, enough to buy a new cloak, or send something home. Something for your trouble. Something for the boils on your feet, the hunger pangs, the nights you thought you wouldn't wake up. But when you reach the front, the man squints at you, then mutters, "Ah, yes, your name isn't on the list." You blink. "What list?" He shrugs. "Ask the clerk. Or the scribe. Or the guy who drowned last week. Next." And that's it. You're pushed aside by the next soldier, who somehow is on the list. He gets 3 coins and a wedge of old cheese. You get nothing. Historians still argue whether medieval soldiers were regularly paid or only compensated after successful campaigns. Some accounts mention fixed rates, others mention plunder shares, and more than a few mention the payment being in exposure, which is another way of saying good luck buying dinner with disappointment. Later that evening, a man with a limp and a missing ear offers to trade you his extra belt for your boots. You refuse. He offers again, this time with a side of fermented turnip. It's less of a bargain, more of a joke. But a desperate one. Thomas is furious. He says he was promised coin and land. You both laugh bitterly. Land. Sure. You'll get land when you're buried in it. Martin claims he once met a knight who was paid in silver bars. Heavy ones. Enough to build a house. You all stare at him. He shrugs. Could have been a dream. Probably was. Some soldiers are promised payment after the campaign. Others are told they're fighting for the honor of the realm. Which is lovely and poetic and entirely useless when you need food. By the next day, the paymaster is gone. Packed up, horse and all. No explanation. Just gone. Some men talk about deserting. Most won't. Not because they're loyal, but because they don't know where to go. You see a small group sharpening their weapons near a tree. Not for battle, but because they plan to raid a nearby village if payment doesn't come soon. One of them says, if the Lord won't pay us, someone will. Fringe sources suggest that roving bands of unpaid soldiers became their own kind of terror, routiers, they were called. Mercenaries in name, bandits in practice. You wonder if that's your future. If the war doesn't kill you, maybe poverty will turn you into something else. For now, though, you do chores. You carry water. Chop firewood. Patch your crumbling boots with scraps of leather that feel more like paper. You hope someone higher up notices your work ethic. They don't. One day, a noble rides through camp in bright, gleaming armor. His horse is braided. His cloak flutters like a painting come to life. He throws a few copper coins into the crowd. Men scramble like rats. You stay still. Pride? Maybe. Exhaustion? Definitely. The man squire sneers at you. Says, smile, soldier. You're part of history. You want to respond. Something witty. Something sharp. But your mouth is dry, your lips cracked, and your patience is long gone. You hear another story, this time about soldiers being paid in onions. Onions. And not even fresh ones. A half-rotted bag, thrown into camp like it's some grand prize. You're not sure whether to laugh or cry. Martin does both. You keep your eyes open, hoping for coins. But all you find is a discarded chicken bone and a broken comb. Neither is legal tender. Both go in your pack anyway. Never know when you'll need a chicken bone. One evening, you see a young man counting his pay, actual silver coins, clean and clinking. He smiles. Brags about his noble cousin pulling strings. That night, someone robs him. No one knows who. Or rather, everyone does. But no one talks. Thomas sighs. That's soldiering, right? You fight for lords who don't know your name, starve for promises no one keeps, and maybe, die with just enough in your pocket for someone else to steal. You nod. Not much else to say. Historians still debate whether the feudal system ever intended fair compensation for lower soldiers, or whether their value was simply in numbers. You suspect it was numbers. Preferably large, and preferably quiet. The next day, you try again. Another quartermaster, another line. This one gives you a torn scrap of cloth and says it's a payment token. Redeemable at the Lord's Keep. Which is 3 towns away, behind enemy lines, and probably doesn't exist. You fold it and tuck it into your pouch. Just in case. You hear rumors of a bonus for surviving the next battle. A silver coin for every enemy head. You glance at your dull sword and your sore arms and think, 1 head. Maybe 2. 3 if I get lucky. Then you feel sick for even thinking it. That night, a soldier from another unit staggers into camp, clutching a bag of coin. Real coin. He collapses before he can say where it came from. Dead from infection. You wonder what'll happen to the bag. It disappears. Of course it does. You're learning quickly that gold is rarer than glory. And glory is already in short supply. Still, you get up. Still, you march. Because you're a soldier now. And no one pays soldiers to stop. The food arrives late, if you're lucky, and suspiciously gray. You poke it with a stick. It jiggles. That's never a good sign. One man insists it's salted pork. Another says it's eel. Martin claims it moved. You decide not to ask. Meals come in 2 basic categories, barely food, and definitely punishment. You often wonder if they're trying to kill you slowly or if this is just what happens when you cook with desperation and a total absence of seasoning. You eat in silence, mostly. Everyone does. Conversation requires energy, and chewing the rubbery bread alone feels like a workout. The crust cracks like stone. The inside is damp. You wonder how it's both stale and undercooked at the same time. You break a tooth on something. A pebble. A bone. A divine test of character. You spit it out and carry on. Rations are handed out irregularly. Some days you get 2 chunks of bread and a strip of dried meat. Other days it's a turnip. Once, memorably, it was a single onion. You cried, not out of emotion, but because it was raw. Water's worse. The barrels are refilled from whatever source is nearest, which usually means muddy streams or shallow pools shared by livestock. Boiling is ideal, but fuel is limited, and patience even more so. Most of the time, you just drink and pray. You feel the sickness before it hits, a deep churn, then a shiver, then the familiar rush for the trench. And then you're spending the night in a state of groaning half-conscious regret, wondering if a person can actually die from soup. Historians still argue whether medieval rations were nutritionally sufficient or simply a slow starvation diet. Some sources suggest a daily caloric intake close to modern military standards, if you're a knight. But you're not. You're you. And you just tried to eat your last crust with a missing molar. You supplement what you can. Martin once caught a squirrel. He didn't skin it properly, but hunger forgives many sins. Thomas steals cabbage from a nearby village garden and swears it tastes like roast duck. It doesn't. Once, a man finds mushrooms near the tree line. Everyone cheers. Then a few hours later, everyone regrets cheering. Turns out they weren't the safe kind. You hallucinate for 2 days and wake up spooning a tree stump. One fringe account claims that some armies believed spoiled food was better for you. It had character. You suspect character means bacteria. On the rare occasion there's meat, it's tough, sinewy, and smells faintly of whatever animal it used to be. Could be sheep. Could be horse. Could be something else. You chew for minutes. It doesn't help. Salt is rare. When you do get it, it's a gray lump you have to scrape with a knife. Sugar is mythical. Spices don't make you laugh. The most exotic thing you've seen is a wilted leek. You dream of honey. Of pies. Of your mother's lentil stew, thick and garlicky. You trade your sword for a bowl. Maybe even your boots. Especially your boots. One day, you're handed something wrapped in leaves. It's sticky. It's sweet. It's a figure. No one knows where it came from, but you eat it reverently, like a gift from heaven. It's the best thing you've tasted in months. You don't even share. Later, guilt creeps in. Not because you didn't share, but because you didn't offer the fig a seat and a place to stay forever. Food becomes the only thing you talk about. Not love. Not glory. Not even survival. Just food. You and the others compare fantasy meals like rich men comparing castles. Someone mentions roasted boar. Another mentions butter. You weep openly at the word cheese. You try to forage once. You find a root. You gnaw on it like a rodent. You pretend it's a carrot. It is not. You also try fishing. You carve a hook from a nail, tie it to your belt cord, and sit by the stream for hours. Nothing bites. Except you, later, when the bugs come out. Food is power. One man hoards moldy bread like treasure. Another threatens to stab over a handful of beans. Theft becomes a quiet art. You hide your ration under your shirt, or inside your boot. You pretend you're not hungry. You always are. There's an officer who eats better than the rest, bread with actual crust, wine that doesn't double as paint thinner, even fruit. You see him laughing one night with a fat sausage in hand. You stare. Not with envy. With primal, unfiltered rage. Thomas mutters, "If he dies, I'm eating his horse." You think about that for far longer than is reasonable. Then one day, the stew comes with a new ingredient, meat that's not stringy, not gray, not completely disgusting. It tastes almost good. People eat in silence, then slowly look around. The quartermaster won't say where it came from. Later, someone notices a dog is missing. You don't bring it up. You just chew slower. Fringe reports tell of starving armies boiling belts, boots, even leather saddles. You laugh when you first hear it. Then you stop laughing, remembering you've tried to chew your own belt once, just to pass the time. You learn to savor even the bad meals. Because bad is better than none. One morning, you wake up to a surprise, fresh bread. Real bread. Still warm. For a moment, the camp is quiet. Not from sickness, or death, or despair, but from awe. The silence of men remembering what joy feels like. The crust cracks perfectly. The inside steams. Then it's gone. A bite. A memory. Nothing more. Back to the gray stew. Back to the hard tack. Back to hunger. You don't notice the fever at first. You're always tired, always aching, always sore. What's one more symptom in a pile of discomforts? But then comes the sweat. Not the good kind from marching or sunlight, but a sickly, cold one that clings to your skin like mold. Your hands shake. You can't eat. Not that you have anything to eat. And when you try, your stomach rebels like a furious goat. You throw up behind your tent, which is generous to call it that. It's more of a lopsided sheet draped over optimism. By the afternoon, you can barely walk. Your bones ache, your back locks up, and your teeth chatter even though the sun's out. Thomas takes one look at you and mutters, "Oh. You've got the camp fever." He tries to laugh it off, but it's a dry laugh, tight with fear. The medic, if you can call him that, is a short, round man who smells of wine and onions. He leans in close, pokes your forehead, and nods. Yep. You're sick. You're amazed at the diagnostic precision. He hands you a pouch of dried herbs and a spoon. Steep these in hot water. If you don't have hot water, chew M. If you can't chew, well, good luck. You lie back in your blanket, the world tilting. Nearby, someone coughs hard, a wet, rattling sound that echoes through camp like a death bell. Disease runs through the ranks faster than any enemy charge. Diarrhea, typhoid, dysentery, plagues with names you don't know, but whose symptoms you now know far too well. Some men double over and don't stand back up. Others sweat through their blankets until they shiver themselves into silence. Historians still argue whether sanitation protocols were understood and simply ignored or truly unknown in most medieval armies. You'd argue no one in this camp has ever met a latrine they respected. Your body gives up walking, so you crawl to the fire pit. No one stops you. Everyone's too focused on their own coughing, itching, or vomiting. You sit in a daze, watching the flames blur and flicker. Someone hands you water. It tastes like wood and moss. You drink it anyway. You pass out. When you wake up, you're in the same place. Night has fallen. The stars are cold dots above you. Someone wrapped you in an extra blanket. You don't know who. You whisper, "Thanks," into the dark, unsure if it was real or imagined. Next to you, a man named Alder hasn't moved all day. He's not breathing. Thomas covers his face and mutters a prayer. Martin just stares. "That's the third this week," he whispers. Then corrects himself, "Fourth, maybe. I've lost count." You try to stand. Your legs wobble like twigs. Everything hurts. But staying still feels worse. You have to move. To remind yourself you're alive. Barely. There's a strange comfort in the fact that no one expects you to fight today. You're too sick. So is everyone else. Even the officers are looking pale. Some ride out and never come back. Desertion, maybe. Or sickness. At this point, the two feel the same. One man suggests rubbing garlic on your chest. Another swears by burying a toad under your tent. Martin walks around with a pouch of crushed pine cones tied to his belt to draw out the evil humors. You don't mock him. You envy him. At least he has something to believe in. Fringe practices like smoking out the illness involve standing near a greenwood fire and letting the acrid smoke burn the sickness out of your lungs. You try it. It just makes you cough harder. You overhear a squire say that the highborn troops have their own healer, a real physician from the city, trained in Latin and everything. He uses rosewater compresses and powdered pearls. You're given a cloth soaked in rainwater and a whisper of, "Hang in there." One morning, you feel better. Not good, just less dying. Your legs still tremble, your stomach still aches, but your vision isn't blurry anymore. You stand without falling. It feels like a small miracle. Thomas grins. See? You're too stubborn to die. You smile weakly, then immediately cough for 10 seconds straight. Dignity is a distant dream. But you survive. You've joined the miserable, hollow-eyed ranks of the recovered. Except now you know something deeper, the battle isn't the only thing trying to kill you. The camp is just as deadly, maybe worse. You don't have to fight to fall. You just have to lie still too long. Historians often overlook the toll of disease in military campaigns, focusing on battles and strategy. But among the soldiers, sickness is the real general, the one no one can defeat. You bury Alder in the dirt beyond the camp's edge. A crude cross marks the spot. You don't have anything better. You whisper something that feels like a goodbye. You're not even sure he had family. At dinner, you're handed a chunk of bread and a strip of meat so tough you could use it as armor. You chew anyway. It tastes like victory. It's your first full meal in days. It hurts to swallow, but it stays down. That's good enough. Martin says the fever has passed, for now. You nod. But deep down, you know it'll come again. It always does. Camp life is a cycle of cold nights, bad food, and sickness circling like vultures. Still, you eat. You sit by the fire. You breathe the damp air and try not to think too much. Because tomorrow, you'll need your strength. The battle hasn't even started yet. You wake to shouting. Not the panicked kind, worse. The organized kind. The kind that means today is the day. The day when all your marching, starving, coughing, and cursing finally earns its payoff. The day of battle. The camp is suddenly alive in a way that feels wrong. Too many men moving with forced purpose. Too many weapons being sharpened in silence. Even the sky seems tense, clouds hanging low like they're watching. You're ordered into formation. If you could call it that. There's no clear rank among the foot soldiers, just clumps of guys shoved into rows. Someone shouts to tighten the line, and everyone pretends to know what that means. Your armor creaks as you move. The straps you tied together with twine are already coming loose. Your sword still doesn't sit right in your hand, like it doesn't know you and doesn't want to. The shield smells worse than ever. You wonder if a rat died inside it. You check. You're not sure. The knight leading your group appears on horseback, gleaming and smug. His armor fits. His boots are dry. His horse looks confused about all the noise. The knight waves his sword like he's conducting an orchestra and yells something inspirational about honor and glory. You don't hear it. You're busy trying not to vomit. Someone passes around wine skins. You take a swig, hoping it calms your nerves. It doesn't. It tastes like vinegar and regret. Thomas drinks half of his and starts humming an old tavern song about dying in the mud. It's weirdly comforting. Then the drums start. Slow. Heavy. Like a heartbeat that's decided to sound the alarm. You start marching again, but this time not toward a camp or a river. This time, it's toward a place you probably won't walk away from. You crest a hill and see them, your enemy. A sea of helmets and spears glinting in the gray morning light. Historians still argue over what medieval battles really looked like, whether they were chaotic free-for-alls or tightly orchestrated maneuvers. From where you're standing, it looks like a brawl waiting to happen. No artistry. Just two mobs with sharp objects and grudges. The ground is soft, damp. Not quite mud, but close. You imagine slipping right into someone's blade. A banana peel of doom. A man next to you says he's going to fake an injury as soon as the fighting starts. Another plans to hide behind a corpse. A third just stares ahead, whispering to no one. You keep moving forward. You grip your sword tighter, willing your hands to stop shaking. They don't. Your breath comes fast, shallow. You can barely hear over the rush in your ears. Then someone yells. And the world erupts. The front lines crash together like gods slamming doors. The sound is indescribable, metal on metal, metal on bone, the screams of men and horses, the cracking of wood, the splatter of something. It's chaos. There's no formation anymore. No clean duel or epic showdown. Just panic. You're pushed forward whether you want to go or not. You swing your sword, hitting something, maybe someone. You don't know. You get hit in the shoulder, hard. Your shield absorbs it, barely. You lose your balance and fall. Someone steps on your hand. You scream. You get up. You swing again. You miss. A spear flashes by your face. You duck. A man beside you catches a blade in the chest and falls without a sound. You can't hear anything but your own breath. You swing again, this time connecting. You think. Your sword sticks in something, and you have to yank it free. Blood. Mud. You don't know. You don't want to. Your helmet slips over your eyes. You rip it off. Bad idea. You immediately catch a slap to the face from a gauntlet. You stumble, dazed. The enemy line breaks and reforms. Arrows whistle overhead. One lands near your foot. Another thunks into a man's back. He stares at you, confused, then crumples. You're breathing hard. Too hard. You're dizzy. You drop your sword for a second and scramble to grab it. And just like that, you're knocked down again. You land on something soft and squishy. You don't want to look. You roll off and crawl through the mud, gasping, dragging your shield like a sled. Fringe accounts describe soldiers wetting themselves in fear. You now believe them. Eventually, your side pulls back. Retreats. Not organized. Not graceful. Just survival. You fall into line with the others, what's left of them. Faces pale. Eyes wide. Blood and grime coating armor and skin. No one speaks. No one cheers. You've survived. That's it. No music. No honor. Just the hollow realization that you didn't die. Not today. You stagger back toward camp. Someone claps you on the shoulder. You flinch. It's Thomas. He's missing a piece of his ear and has blood all down his front. You all right? He asks. You want to say something brave. Something witty. Something fitting. Instead, you throw up on your boots. You survive the battle, barely. But survival doesn't mean healing. It means limping back to camp with blood in your hair and ringing in your ears, wondering which parts of you still belong to you. The cut on your arm stings with every movement, but you don't dare look too closely. If it's bad, you'll just have to live with it. If it's worse, well, you won't be living with anything. There's no proper field hospital. There's a tent, if you're lucky, where a man with dirty hands and a knife pretends to be a surgeon. You sit in line, watching him work. No gloves, no tools beyond a dagger and a spoon, no antiseptic, just prayer and pressure. You finally reach the front, and the surgeon squints at your wound. "Not too deep," he mutters. Then he pours something that smells like vinegar and fire onto your arm. You scream. He tells you to stop being dramatic. Then he sews you up with horsehair and something he calls boiled thread, though you don't recall seeing any fire. Or boiling. Or hygiene. Historians still argue whether medieval battlefield medicine was rudimentary by necessity or by ignorance. You're pretty sure it's a tragic cocktail of both. There's no pain relief, no anesthetic, no numbing agent, no poppy syrup unless you know someone rich. You grit your teeth and scream into your sleeve. The stitching is uneven. You're told not to move the arm. You immediately move it by accident, and the whole thing burns again. You shuffle away, woozy, arm bandaged in what looks like a torn shirt sleeve and a prayer. You collapse by a fire and try not to cry. Then you notice Thomas sitting nearby, cradling a broken finger wrapped in twine. "At least you got thread," he jokes. You don't laugh. You hear coughing again, everywhere. The sick didn't get better after the battle. Many are worse. Infection spreads like gossip. A man with a leg wound begins to smell wrong. By evening, he's delirious, mumbling about frogs and fire. They bury him the next morning. Someone whispers about amputation. You try not to think about it. You've seen what that looks like. 2 men hold you down, and the third swings an axe. Not a surgical tool. An axe. No sedation, no antiseptic, just hot iron to cauterize and a wooden bit to bite down on. One man didn't wake up. The other screamed himself unconscious. There are herbal remedies, yarrow, plantain, garlic mash, honey if you're truly blessed. Martin claims his grandmother's salve could heal a wolf bite. You try a bit on your wound. It smells like feet, but it seems to help. Or maybe you're just used to the pain now. You watch your arm every day, sniffing it like a dog. Any change in smell, any redness, any swelling, and you start preparing your farewell speech. One fringe record claims that some battlefield healers carried amulets or chanted prayers as part of the treatment. You try one, an old rhyme your mother used to sing when you were ill. You whisper it as you lie down each night, pretending it still holds power. You begin to see scars forming on men you fought beside. A missing ear here. A split lip there. A sunken eye, a twisted wrist. Everyone becomes a walking museum of pain. You yourself now wear a tight line of stitches like a badge, though it earns no respect, only more groans when you try to carry anything. The food doesn't help recovery. Thin gruel and bread that crumbles like old plaster. No meat. No fruit. You crave something with color, something that didn't come from a moldy bag. Even a boiled carrot would feel like a feast. Instead, you get porridge that tastes faintly of dirt. Probably because it includes dirt. You rest, if you can call it that. Your tent leaks. Your arm throbs. The firewood is damp, so your nights are smoky and cold. You lie awake, listening to others moan, scratch, cough. There is no silence. Even when people stop talking, the suffering hums like background noise. You try to wash your wound, but the stream is low and the water smells off. You use a damp cloth and hope the gods are watching. If they are, they're asleep. Or laughing. One night, you wake up to screams. A man in the next tent is clawing at his bandages. His wound has turned black. The smell reaches your nose before the sight does. They drag him out, but it's too late. He's dead by dawn. You cover your own bandage tighter and try to breathe through your mouth. Thomas talks about going home. What's the point, he says, if I come back with half a leg and a hollow head? You nod. Not because you agree, but because you don't know what else to do. Your own wound begins to scab. It itches. That's supposed to be a good sign. Martin cheers and tells you you're a tough old goat. You smile, finally, but it fades fast. Across the fire, another man is coughing blood into his hands. Some heal. Most don't. There's no consistency. A scratch festers while a deep cut mends. A fever breaks for one man, then takes two more the same night. The healer throws his hands up. Body wants to live, it lives. Doesn't? Can't do much. Somehow, you're still standing. You try not to question it. Maybe your body's too stubborn to die. Or maybe it's saving it for later. By week's end, you can use your arm again. Not well, but enough to swing a sword. Enough to carry a shield. Enough to get thrown back into the fray. Because healing doesn't buy you rest. Healing just puts you back in line. You thought the battle was the worst part. You were wrong. Because now comes the siege. It starts slowly, like a bad song you know is going to get stuck in your head. Marches halt near a stone fortress crouched atop a hill. It looks quiet. Peaceful, even. The kind of place you'd want to live, if you weren't here to starve it out or be starved in return. There's no glorious charge this time. No trumpets, no galloping knights, no dramatic speeches. Just waiting. Endless, spirit-crushing, mud-caked waiting. Your unit is stationed just outside the outer wall, close enough to smell the latrines from both sides. You spend the first few days digging ditches. Not for defense. For sewage. Again. And you're handed a spade and told, try not to get dysentery this time. You sleep in makeshift tents. Again. You eat dry bread and stew with no stew in it. Again. And you listen to the wind whistle through the cracks in your armor while the enemy watches silently from the battlements above. Occasionally, an arrow is fired. Sometimes a rock. Once, someone throws a dead pig over the wall. It lands with a grotesque splat in the middle of camp. You all stare at it. Martin jokes, dinner. No one laughs. Siege warfare is slow. It's not about heroism. It's about attrition. Whoever breaks first, inside or out, loses. You're betting their supplies run out before yours do. You've seen what your side calls supplies, so you're not feeling very optimistic. Historians still argue whether sieges in the Middle Ages were more effective through force or starvation. You'd vote starvation. Mostly because that's what you're experiencing firsthand. You get one meal a day. Maybe. It's always the same, gruel, crust, and a strange broth that may or may not contain turnip. You drink it, because the alternative is hunger. Hunger makes men do stupid things. Like chewing leather. or licking rocks. After a week, the boredom sets in. You're told not to approach the walls, not to wander too far, and not to do anything that looks like thinking. You sit in mud. You carve sticks. You stare at the sky and wonder how long it takes to dig under a wall with a spoon. Thomas starts collecting bugs. Not for food, yet, but out of sheer desperation for entertainment. He names one Sir Wiggles and insists its nobility. You let him have this. The rain comes, of course. Because why wouldn't it? The gods never miss an opportunity to mock you. The trench fills with water. Your socks stay soaked for 3 days straight. Your skin starts to wrinkle like an old pear. Your morale does the same. Then the noise begins, grinding, creaking, hammering. The engineers are building something. A siege tower, maybe. Or a catapult. Or a weird ladder. You don't ask. You're told to help haul the logs. Each log weighs about the same as your soul. You and 10 other men heave one uphill through muck while an officer yells encouragement that sounds suspiciously like insults. You slip. You fall. You get a splinter the size of a toothpick jammed under your nail. You scream quietly, because no one has sympathy left to spare. After hours of labor, the structure is complete. It leans slightly. You all nod like it's a masterpiece. Later that night, it collapses in the wind. You begin to wonder if the fortress is even real. Maybe it's a hallucination. Maybe you died in the first battle, and this is some bizarre purgatory where you drag logs for eternity. Fringe records claim some besieging armies spent months, camped outside enemy castles, building elaborate devices and starving both sides into surrender. You're not sure which side you're on anymore. You just know you're not winning. The enemy taunts you sometimes. Not with arrows, but with laughter. They hang banners mocking your lord. They toss bread over the wall, not stale bread, but fresh, warm, soft bread. You hate them more for the bread than for the arrows. Your officer tries to rally the troops. Victory is near, he declares. A pigeon poops on his helmet mid-sentence. The men take that as a divine rebuttal. The sickness returns, naturally. Too many people packed in too close for too long. The latrine trench overflows. You see someone throw up into their helmet, clean it out, then wear it again. You swear off humanity for the rest of the day. The plan, such as it is to wait until the castle gives up. Or runs out of food. Or opens the gates out of pity. You know that's not going to happen. Their walls are thick. Their morale seems intact. And they probably have cheese. Real cheese. That thought makes you weep. One night, you're ordered to help dig a tunnel toward the foundation. A siege mine, they call it. You just call it claustrophobia with a shovel. You crawl underground in a hole barely wider than your shoulders, scraping dirt and praying the ceiling holds. You hear rocks shift. You hear something scurry past your face. You feel something drop on your neck. You scream, drop the shovel, and crawl backward like your life depends on it. It does. The tunnel collapses 2 hours later. You lose your favorite boot in the mud. A fair trade, all things considered. Morale sinks lower than the tunnel. You hear rumors that your side will try to storm the walls. Tomorrow. Or the next day. Or soon. You know what that means. More arrows. More screaming. More men falling from ladders like sacks of flour. Thomas says he had a dream that you all got inside the castle. There was fire, chaos, and blood, but also roasted meat and warm beds. You tell him it's the fever talking. But that night, you dream it too. And you start hoping. Just a little. The ladders are ready. They lean against the makeshift barricade like slender promises of death, each one splintered, crooked, and far too short for comfort. You eye them with suspicion. Climbing a wooden stick while people on top throw rocks at you doesn't seem like a sound plan. But you don't get to make plans. You just follow orders. At dawn, the horn blows. Not a triumphant call to arms, more of a sad honk, like someone dropped a goose down a well. You line up with the others, shield on your back, sword in hand, and ladder at your feet. You notice Thomas making the sign of the cross over and over. Martin mutters something about his mother's stew. You do nothing. You're too scared to think. They tell you the goal is to scale the walls, overwhelm the guards, and open the gate from the inside. It sounds simple when shouted by a man in full armor sitting on a horse 30 feet behind the front line. Historians still debate the effectiveness of siege ladders versus siege towers. You would personally like to vote neither. You run when they tell you to run. The ground squelches beneath your feet, a slippery mess of trampled grass and old mud. Arrows darken the sky. You keep your head down. You run. And then you reach the wall. It towers above you, cold and uncaring. The ladder feels like it might break just from looking at it. You plant it anyway and start climbing. Step by step, heart pounding. You hear screams behind you, someone falls. Another man's ladder is kicked away, sending him tumbling into the moat. You keep climbing. Up and up. The stone is slick with something you don't want to name. Halfway up, a bucket of something unpleasant hits your helmet. It smells of rot and insult. You gag, slip, and somehow cling on. Your hand burns. You've cut yourself again. A rock glances off your shoulder. You nearly fall. Thomas is climbing beneath you. Don't stop, he yells. His face is streaked with blood or mud or both. You reach the top. Almost. A man leans over the parapet and jabs a spear toward your face. You duck. You swing your sword and miss completely. But Thomas rams into the ladder behind you, giving you just enough momentum to lurch forward. Your hand grasps the stone edge of the wall. You pull yourself over. And immediately fall onto your back, winded. It's chaos up here. Steel against steel. Screams echoing. The wall's surface is narrow, slippery, and crowded with desperate men doing desperate things. You push yourself up, stagger to your feet, and start swinging. You don't think. You just swing. A man lunges at you. You parry, barely, and return the strike. Your sword digs into his side. He screams. You shove him. He topples backward over the wall. You hear nothing when he lands. You try not to think about it. More of your side clamber over the edge. The wall is contested now, a seesaw of limbs and weapons. Someone pushes past you, swinging a flail. It hits the enemy. Then it hits you. Your ear rings like a cathedral bell. Martin appears at your side, covered in grime and foaming at the mouth from effort. We're pushing them back, he shouts. And he's right. For the first time in days, weeks, you see the enemy falter. Just a bit. Enough to matter. Enough for your forces to gain footing. And then, Like magic, the gate opens. Not with a triumphant boom, but with a groan. Someone inside has done the unthinkable, unlocked the stronghold. Maybe a traitor. Maybe a lucky soldier. Maybe Thomas. You never find out. Your side floods in. You're carried along in the tide of boots and cheers and bloodied weapons. Through the gate, into the courtyard. Everything spinning. The smells are worse inside, burnt oil, smoke, unwashed humanity. The defenders are still fighting, but the momentum is yours now. You push forward, shoulder to shoulder, cutting through pockets of resistance. Not cleanly. Not heroically. Just brutally. Fringe accounts of medieval sieges suggest that the moment of breach often triggered total collapse, both for the attackers and the defenders. Something primal takes over. And you feel it. You're not a person right now. You're something else. The last of the enemy falls. Or flees. You're too dazed to tell. But eventually, there's no one left to fight. Just the sound of ragged breathing and steel clattering to the ground. It's over. For now. You collapse against a wall and slide to the floor. You're soaked in sweat and other things. Your sword is chipped. Your arm is trembling. But you're alive. Thomas slumps next to you. We did it, he mutters, half laughing, half sobbing. You nod. And then the looting begins. Your side swarms the fortress like ants on honey. Men tear open storage rooms, dragging out sacks of flour, barrels of wine, and bundles of clothing. You see one soldier try to ride a goat out the front gate. You find a bit of bread and a small hunk of cheese in the ruins of a kitchen. You eat it without tasting, then feel guilty you didn't share. But only a little. Some soldiers are searching bodies. Others are setting fires. Why? No one knows. It's just what happens. You walk through the chaos, dazed. Looking for something. Martin's voice calls out. He's found an entire jug of wine and is singing a song with no words. You let him. Let everyone have their moment. The walls stand silent now. No arrows. No boiling oil. Just smoke and stunned survivors. Historians still argue whether the capture of enemy fortresses was worth the human cost. You're not sure. You're too tired to care. But you lived. You climbed the ladder. You swung your sword. You stood on the wall. And you're still here. Victory tastes like ash. The fortress is yours, the enemy scattered or dead, the banner of your lord now fluttering where there's once flew. But no one's cheering anymore. Not really. The rush of adrenaline is gone, and what remains is the ache. In your limbs. In your head. In your soul, if that's still intact. You shuffle through the ruined courtyard. The stones are blackened from fire. Bodies lie where they fell, both friend and foe, and no one rushes to move them. The air smells of burnt wood, iron, and something else, something thicker, darker. You try not to breathe too deeply. There's a command to begin cleanup. Secure the halls. Guard the gates, shout someone who hasn't fought a minute of the battle. You and a handful of others are tasked with clearing a storeroom that now houses 2 broken doors and 1 very angry chicken. You let it be. It's earned its space. The stone corridors inside the keep are cool, even peaceful, in contrast to the madness outside. You find a hallway with shattered furniture, blood-streaked walls, and a smashed chandelier. Martin, limping from a cut on his thigh, looks around and mutters, "Home sweet home. You're told you'll be garrisoning the castle now." Which sounds prestigious until you realize what that really means. You get to sleep indoors but still have to stand watch, carry barrels, scrub latrines, and patch walls. Medieval luxury. At night, you're given a room with 6 other men. It used to be a servant's quarters. Now it's yours. You sleep on straw, covered in someone's old tapestry. It smells like dust and goat. But there's a door. And a window. And no rain leaking through the ceiling. That alone feels like sinfully decadent comfort. You sit with Thomas and Martin around a small hearth. There's actual firewood here. Actual warmth. Martin has acquired a dented lute from who knows where and strums broken tunes that sound like sorrow. You talk about nothing important. What bread you found. How good it felt to wash your hands. How someone claimed to see a ghost in the pantry. You don't question it. Then comes the next order. Reconstruction duty. Turns out, winning the siege means you also win the right to clean up the mess. You're hauling stones, patching walls, moving rubble. One soldier breaks his foot under a loose beam and is sent home. You envy him more than you should. Historians still argue whether post-siege occupations were peaceful transitions or extended nightmares. From your vantage, it's a bit of both. Some townsfolk return, scared, quiet, uncertain. Some soldiers take liberties they shouldn't. The officers bark rules. The rules get ignored. You try to keep to yourself. Food improves, slightly. The enemy had stores hidden, barrels of grain, pickled vegetables, even salted fish. For a few days, you eat like a human being. Real bread. Boiled eggs. Warm broth with herbs. You cry, openly, the first time you taste garlic again. No one mocks you. Fringe accounts tell of soldiers gaining weight during long garrisons. You don't. Too much work. Too many nightmares. You still wake sweating, clutching your sword. Sometimes you scream. Other times, you just sit upright and stare at the door until dawn. A priest arrives to bless the chapel and hold services. You attend once, mostly out of curiosity. He talks about sacrifice, duty, divine purpose. You think of all the dead. The coughing. The hunger. The rats. You leave early. You find moments of peace, rare and fleeting. A bird singing in the courtyard. A game of dice played under a repaired awning. The sight of Thomas actually smiling for once, chewing on an apple like it's the first joy he's ever known. But it's never far. The fear. The weariness. The sense that this is just the eye of the storm. One morning, the captain announces that the army will move out again, soon. Another border. Another lord. Another dispute. You're to march in 10 days. You feel your heart sink through your boots. All of this, just to start over. You've barely healed. Your wound still stings. Your boots still chafe. Your nightmares still come every night like clockwork. You want to stay. Not because it's good here, but because it's less bad. Martin says what everyone's thinking, we'll die next time. I can feel it. You try to argue, but you can't. Because you feel it too. You start preparing anyway. You pack your things, what little you've gathered. A cleaner shirt. A dented cup. A pouch of herbs from the old castle kitchen. One last crust of hard cheese. You rub oil into your sword, though the blade still hums with trauma. You visit the battlements one last time. The view is stunning, hills, trees, a river glittering in the morning light. It almost feels peaceful. Almost. Then you remember what lies just outside that view, more mud, more cold, more death. Still, you stay for a moment, breathing slowly. Maybe you won't come back. Maybe none of you will. But for now, you have 10 days. 10 days of something resembling shelter. Of small meals and bad jokes. Of mended wounds and music played on broken strings. You'll take it. Because in this life, 10 days of not dying is as good as a holiday. The 10 days vanish like breath on a windowpane. 1 minute you're scrubbing out a corner of the castle kitchen, humming along to Martin's terrible lute playing. The next, the horn blows and you're back on the road again, a pack on your shoulder and your boots already wet. It's always raining when you march. Or snowing. Or blazing hot. Never pleasant. You don't ask where you're going. No one tells you. Orders are passed down like rumors, distorted with every voice. You hear talk of a distant valley, some noble's quarrel, maybe a rebellion. The specifics don't matter. Marching is your new career now. You fall into line with your old unit, if you can call this ragtag mess a unit. Thomas is beside you, dragging his feet but grinning anyway. Martin has tied a rag around his knee, which he insists helps with the alignment of the stars and bones. You let him have it. The road is worse this time. Narrow, rocky, and lined with dead trees that creak even when the wind's not blowing. Every step sinks into the mud like the earth is trying to eat you. You haven't seen a village in 2 days, and your bread has molded into a soft green lump of shame. You eat it anyway. At night, you sleep on the side of the road, under a tarp that leaks strategically over your nose. Your blanket smells of sweat and campfire. You curl up around your gear, hoping no one steals it. There are always rumors of disappearances during marches. You pretend you don't hear them. One morning, a man collapses in the line beside you. No wound. No sound. Just gone. They roll him into a ditch and keep marching. Historians still argue how much medieval armies lost to attrition rather than battle. You'd argue it's a miracle any army made it anywhere at all. You sing songs to pass the time, songs about beer, women, and fish you've never seen. Martin invents lyrics as he goes. Thomas harmonizes terribly. The sound keeps your brain from thinking too much. About the hunger. The cold. The way your right boot feels like it's full of broken glass. Eventually, the land opens up into rolling hills. Green, quiet. Pretty, even. A farmer might call it beautiful. You call it a place where you'll probably die tomorrow. You make camp by a stream. The water is actually clear, for once, and tastes like something that hasn't killed a rat. You wash your face and hands. You see your reflection. Pale. Thin. Eyes that look like they belong to someone else. You wonder if your family would recognize you. Martin finds a turtle near the bank. He names it Sir Mudley. You all salute it like it's a knight. It's the only morale boost you've had in days. The officers begin inspecting armor again. Polish your helmets. Fix your straps, they bark, as if these battered scraps of metal could save you from what's coming. You do what you can. Your chainmail smells like a butcher's apron, but at least it fits, more or less. One of the younger squires drops his sword during inspection. The officer makes him run laps around the camp. You watch, remembering when you used to have energy. You watch him stumble. Then fall. He doesn't get up. The medics haul him away. Heatstroke, maybe. Or fever. Or heartbreak. Hard to tell, really. You overhear the officers talking. The enemy is near, rebels, apparently. Poorly armed, poorly trained, desperate. But there are many of them. And desperation is a terrifying thing. You lie awake that night, staring at the stars. They look exactly the same as they did from the castle walls. Indifferent. Cold. Timeless. You wonder what they see when they look down at you. A speck. A fool. A footnote. Fringe accounts mention soldiers believing in marching spirits, ghosts of the dead who walk alongside you, whispering warnings or trying to pull you away from the road. You start to believe it. You hear things in the trees. See shadows that don't move. Maybe it's exhaustion. Maybe not. The next day, you arrive at the edge of a valley. The officers point and grunt, there. You see the rebel camp. Smoke from fires. Makeshift tents. No real walls. You wonder if they're afraid. You wonder if they're looking back at you with the same hollow dread. You're told to dig in. Build a trench. Stack stones. Prepare for something. You dig. You stack. You try not to think. A message comes that evening. A parley is happening. Some diplomat or knight is trying to talk the rebels down. No need to fight, they say. Let's be reasonable. You laugh when you hear that. Reason left the building back when you were eating bark soup under a tree 2 campaigns ago. Thomas tells you he has a good feeling. Maybe we don't have to fight tomorrow. Martin rolls his eyes. You said that last time. Yeah, well, Thomas shrugs, I'm due for a lucky guess. You all sleep with your boots on. Just in case. You dream of walking down a quiet path, away from the army, into a forest. In the dream, you're not wearing armor. You're carrying a basket of apples. You don't know why, but it makes you cry in your sleep. At dawn, the officer returns from the parley. The rebels said no. You draw your sword. You kiss the hilt like a fool. You line up again. And march toward the next fight. There's no ceremony this time. No rallying cry, no dramatic horn, no gleaming banners. Just the clunk of armor, the squelch of boots, and the quiet dread that clings to your skin like damp wool. You're told this'll be easy. Rebels without training, the officer says. They'll break in minutes. You nod because you have no choice, but your stomach twists. The last time someone said that, Martin nearly lost an eye. The battlefield is an open stretch of churned-up pasture, the grass trampled flat by hooves and hobnail boots. You see the rebels on the far side, ragged figures behind a palisade of logs and carts. They look hungry. Afraid. Just like you. One of them is wearing a cooking pot as a helmet. And that's when it hits you, these aren't warriors. They're farmers. Bakers. Former servants. People like your brother. Like you, before the sword. You glance at Thomas. His jaw is tight. His knuckles white on his hilt. You both know this won't be a battle. It'll be a slaughter. The order comes. You advance. Slowly. Reluctantly. The mud is thick, the air cold. You hear your heart louder than the footsteps. Halfway across the field, a rebel fires a crossbow bolt. It whistles past your ear and thunks into the chest of the man beside you. He drops like a sack of grain, eyes wide. No cry. No drama. Just gone. Historians still argue how many of these peasant revolts ended in true combat. Some believe they were mostly negotiated or dispersed before violence. But you're living the other side. The charge begins. You sprint forward because everyone else does. The rebel palisade looms closer. Then you're at it, hacking at wooden barriers while arrows rain down like cursed hail. A gap opens. You push through. And then, chaos. The rebels fight with desperation. With clubs, pitchforks, rusted swords. One man swings a butcher's cleaver with terrifying force. You block it. Barely. You push him away. He doesn't fall back. He just swings again. You don't want to kill him. You truly, deeply don't. But your sword moves without asking you first. You feel it hit something soft. He drops. You don't look down. Someone else grabs your arm. You twist. Elbow. Push. They stagger away. Martin charges past, yelling nonsense, blood already on his blade. A rebel woman screams at you. She's no older than your mother. She has no weapon, only a pan. You hesitate, just long enough for someone else to knock her down. Your legs feel like they belong to someone else. The tide turns fast. The rebels break, some scatter, others fall where they stand. You see one group drop their weapons and raise their hands. They beg. Your captain ignores them. That's when the real horror begins. Your side surges forward, cutting down men who no longer resist. A few soldiers try to stop it. Most don't. One man starts laughing hysterically as he swings at anyone in reach. Thomas vomits in a ditch and doesn't stop for 5 minutes. You back away, chest heaving. You drop to your knees and claw off your helmet, gasping. The smell of blood is thick in the air, metallic, sour, final. Fringe chronicles mention moments like this, massacres hidden behind the word victory. You understand now why the records are vague. Eventually, someone blows a horn. It's over. Again. You stand among the wreckage, your hands trembling. You don't remember sheathing your sword. You don't remember anything, really. Just flashes. A scream. A shove. The look in someone's eyes right before they died. You stagger away from the battlefield. Away from the moans, the ruined bodies, the crows already circling. You find a creek. You fall into it. Not deliberately. You just collapse and let the water run over you. Cold, clear, cruel. You splash it on your face until your skin stings. Then you hear a soft voice behind you. Thomas. He sits beside you in the water. I think I saw a kid out there, he whispers. Maybe 12. With a slingshot. You don't say anything. He cries. Quietly. In a way that doesn't ask for comfort. You sit beside him, too soaked, shivering lumps in armor that doesn't feel worth the metal. That night, you return to camp. The officers praise your performance. A swift and necessary blow, they say. Justice for the realm. You lie down in your tent and stare at the ceiling until the stars go out. In the morning, you're handed a strip of leather with a symbol burned into it. Reward, they say. Token of valor. You toss it into the mud. Martin says he's leaving. He's done. Let them chase me, he says. I'll take my chances with the woods. You nod. You don't blame him. Thomas doesn't say anything. He just sharpens his knife in silence. Later that day, you hear music. A lute, off-key, coming from a distant tent. You hope it's Martin. You let the sound wash over you. Because the next order will come soon. And the road never ends. The next order comes quietly. No horn this time. Just a scroll nailed to a tree, curling at the edges, listing names, including yours. You're moving out again. A different province, a new noble dispute, someone insulted someone else's grandmother and now half the countryside has to bleed for it. You barely react. You've stopped reacting to anything. Thomas reads the list, sighs, and mutters, "Guess we're still useful." You pack your things, what little you have left. Your boots are still wet from the creek. Your sword is still stained. Your heart is somewhere far away, under a blanket of fog and exhaustion. The march begins at dawn. Again. The countryside rolls on, a blur of fields and forests. You barely register it anymore. Just trees passing. Just mud underfoot. You might be going in circles. It wouldn't matter. As you walk, you pass villages. Some wave. Some hide. One group of children throws stones and calls you killers. You don't argue. It's not worth it. There's a new recruit marching near you, young, bright-eyed, still polishing his armor like it'll matter. He asks you if you've seen real battle. You don't answer. You just nod once. He says he can't wait. You try not to look at him. You camp that night in the ruins of an old abbey. The walls are crumbled, the roof open to the stars. Someone lights a small fire, and you huddle around it, trying to feel something. Thomas tells a story, something from home, about a cow that ran through a wedding feast. Everyone laughs, even you. It feels wrong and right at the same time. Historians still argue what kept medieval armies going: faith, fear, coin, or habit. For you, it's none of those. It's momentum. Once you've started walking, it's hard to stop. You think of Martin sometimes. Did he make it? Is he sitting by a river, fishing, breathing, healing? You hope so. You picture him playing that broken lute to birds. It helps. The next morning, you wake early. The mist is thick, softening the world. You watch it drift over the stones, the trees, the faces of the men around you. For a moment, it feels like the world is holding its breath. You stand, stretch, and feel every joint creak. Your knees ache. Your back feels like it's carved from wood. But you're alive. You're still here. You see the new recruit again. He's trying to shave with a chipped blade, cutting himself more than the hair. He winces and laughs at himself. You hand him a cloth. He thanks you. You nod. And then it's time to march. Again. But something's different. Not in the road or the weather or the food, they're still terrible. But inside you, there's a shift. Not hope, exactly. Just endurance. A sense that maybe, just maybe, you can carry this weight a little farther. A little longer. maybe you'll find a way out. Or maybe you'll just keep walking until the road runs out. Either way, you'll keep going. Because that's what you do. Because you're a soldier. And that's all you've been allowed to be. And now, the march finally ends, for tonight, at least. You lie back in your bed, letting the echoes of hooves and horns fade away. The sword slips from your hand, the mud dries, and the ache in your bones begins to melt into the softness of the present moment. Take a breath. You've walked far across this long, difficult night, through the muck of forgotten fields, beneath rain-choked skies, and into the haunted corridors of castles that never knew peace. You've stood in bloodied armor, shouldered burdens too heavy for any one life, and yet somehow, you've carried on. Let that weight lift. Let the fires of battle cool into distant embers, and the clamor of steel soften into silence. There are no orders here. No marching. No shouts. No ladders to climb. Only quiet. The kind of quiet you've earned. The kind that wraps around you like a blanket, tucking you in beneath the stars. As your breath slows, picture those hills you passed, green and wide and empty now, the wind brushing through the tall grass, carrying away the last cries of war. Imagine a path leading somewhere new. Somewhere safe. Somewhere you don't have to fight anymore. You're not a soldier now. Not here. Not tonight. You're just you. And you're home. So rest now. Let the world fall away. And sleep.